Great. Looks like we have many people living with Parkinson's joining us, spouses, partners, and family members with Parkinson's. So thank you all for joining us. Again, if you need any assistance today, please contact us by using that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to say a big thank you to today's sponsors, Acadia Pharmaceuticals, Accorda Therapeutics, Amneal, Kiowa Curran, and Lundbeck. And a special thank you to our silver sponsor, Synovian. For more information about these companies and resources that they provide and offer to the Parkinson's community, including detailed product information, please visit our virtual exhibit hall located at parkinson.org/Minnesota Dakotas/chapter-supporters. When you visit this page, all you need to do is click on the sponsors logo to learn more. Just like to share a little bit about the foundation. The mission of the Parkinson's Foundation is to make lives better for people living with Parkinson's by improving care and researching until there's a tomorrow without the disease. In everything we do, we build on the energy, experience, and passion of the global Parkinson's community. We provide free resources, including our website, parkinson.org, educational book series, webinars, podcasts, our hospital safety kit called Aware and Care, and our toll-free helpline, 1-800-4PD-INFO, which is staffed by Parkinson's specialists. We also have weekly webinars you can find at parkinson.org/PDHealth. We invest more than $10 million annually to support the most talented minds in research to explore what causes Parkinson's, how to treat it, and ultimately how to cure it. We have launched a very exciting initiative called PD Generation, which provides free genetic testing and counseling to those with Parkinson's disease. After a successful pilot program, we are thrilled to announce that PD Generation study has launched its next step, a genetic test that can be completed at home. Now more than ever, we know that having an at-home option is vital to reaching people with Parkinson's. Participants of the study can now submit their testing using the at-home kit and review the results with a genetic counselor virtually. To learn more and to get further information, please visit parkinson.org/PD Generation. All right, so with all that information, I'd love to get to the meat of our topic today and introduce our first speaker, Miss Nan Kennelly from Onward Therapy. She's a speech language pathologist. So as a reminder, as the program is going, feel free to ask any questions by clicking and writing in that Q&A icon. And we'll do our best to get to answer all those questions at the end of the program. So thank you, Nan, for joining us, and you can feel free to get started by sharing your slides.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone see that okay? Is that working, Erin?
Yes, we can see it. Thanks, Nan.
Okay, that sounds good. Hello, as Erin said, my name is Nan Kennelly. I am a speech pathologist in Fargo, North Dakota, with a private practice called Onward Therapy. And our practice here, we are all speech pathologists, and we specialize in adult neuro rehab, which would include assessment and treatment for difficulties related with Parkinson's disease. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to go through some changes that can occur in both speech and swallowing with Parkinson's disease, and why and how speech pathology can be helpful in the management and treatment of those difficulties. Do we have a poll question after the first one? I'm kind of curious. I think the first question, do you have one, Danielle? Well, that's a lot of them all at once, sorry. Just take a minute. I think that will be good information as we're going forward, so I know exactly who I'm really talking with here. Okay, great. That's good information. And I'll be referring to these things as we go along. So thank you for doing that. One of the questions I get right off the bat all the time is, what is a speech language pathologist anyway? Our title is so confusing that even we are confused. So we answer to lots of names. We answer to speech teacher, speech therapist, cognitive therapist, swallow therapist, voice therapist, rehab specialist. We're kind of known here as cognitive communication specialists. We're all registered or certified brain injury specialists. So it gets confusing, but a lot of those fall under the title of speech language pathologist, which is the degree and that we have. We're all master's level clinicians, and this is the area that we've chosen to specialize in here at Onward Therapy, but any and all of these titles would be appropriate to use or refer to when you're thinking of areas of speech and language and swallow. So these, the primary areas of service that we focus on are speech, language, cognition, voice, and swallow. These are all areas that can be affected by Parkinson's disease, but all areas that are typically treated by a speech language pathologist. Sorry, my arrow's not working. I had to use my mouse, but it's really sensitive there. Okay, another big question. Do you need a speech language pathologist on your team? And I think, we're getting better and better at recognizing who our team members are. And I think speech pathology, along with other disciplines, are typically included. But if you and your provider haven't talked about it, it might be worth a conversation with your primary care provider and your specialist to think about how speech language pathology might help. And we often will ask these questions. Do people ask you to repeat? Does your voice sound hoarse, scratchy, or breathy? Does your family say you speak too softly? Do you clear your throat often? Is your voice strong on some days, weak on others? Do you cough when you eat or drink? Or the typical one we get often is, my spouse needs a hearing aid, which is another way of saying I'm speaking softly. So those are typical questions that might spark that conversation. Here are some objectives I want to go through today. I'm hoping by the end of this talk that we will all understand the importance of communication, the health benefits of communication and social engagement, the barriers when communication abilities are interrupted, ways to maintain good communication, and the role of speech pathology can play on your team. Why is communication so important? I know I'm biased, but I absolutely believe communication is probably one of the most important parts of quality of life. It's the foundation for all of our relationships. It's our ability to share our thoughts and ideas and our opinions, our humor. It's our way to interact. It's our way to make strangers into friends. It's necessary. So things that can interrupt communication, including Parkinson's, often need a good focus. And we want to make sure that we maintain the ability to communicate with treatment, with strategies, or other means. I put on the slide here different ways that we communicate, or settings. So we don't even think about it, but I know one of the things we hear often here is communication on the phone, but also in the community, at stores, talking to your pets, doing things for fun, children and grandchildren, work or volunteer, just overall social engagement. Communication is so important. The problem can be when decreased participation in meaningful conversation with health changes can change the quality of life. So I'm happy to see that in the poll, most of you said you do not withdraw socially. because of trouble communicating. And that's our ultimate goal. We don't want withdrawal from social interaction. So that's a really good place to start. I do think it's good for us to talk about these things so that as we go forward, that we're aware of it, that I find myself pulling back on communication. I'm finding myself avoiding or not jumping in to say something, that might be an indicator to have a conversation with your medical provider. Here's some facts about communication and Parkinson's disease. Overall, there's reduced amplitude with Parkinson's that turns down the volume to the whole body. And I know Teresa is going to be talking about movement later, but it also turns down the volume in speaking. And that's literally in quiet talking, but also physically, just in smaller movements. You know, a person with Parkinson's can tend to talk with less animation, less facial movement, and also less volume. On the flip side, Parkinson's can affect our perception of loudness. So a person might feel like they're talking loudly, but the listener is saying you're talking very quietly. So that disconnect in perception versus the reality of the communication effort is something that is definitely a factor with Parkinson's disease. 9 out of 10 people with Parkinson's, over 1 million, are at risk for a weak voice, difficulty with communication, speech, or voice, and also with swallowing. So those are the two big things we're going to be talking about today because they are so prevalent. Speech and voice characteristics with Parkinson's disease. Like I just reviewed that a little briefly, but decreased loudness, a hoarse vocal quality, monotone pitch, imprecise articulation. And what that means is just the sharpness of the different sounds that make up our message tend to melt together a little bit. They're not precise. Vocal tremor, a fast rate, and a lack of facial expression, or as we often say, a flat affect. It's interesting because these are sometimes the very first symptoms of Parkinson's. So these can be an indicator for diagnosis. Social engagement and wellness. Just a little plug on that. I think we already did that slide. I was going to have that one here, but social connectedness is linked to late life physical, cognitive, and psychological health. And this is all backed by research. Mid to late life social engagement is associated with better cognitive and physical health and greater longevity. Studies confirm the above findings as well as being less depressed. We all do better when we have some social connection. Here are the risks. Communication difficulties, feeling ignored, feeling irrelevant, disconnection to the social group, hesitancy, avoidance, lowered confidence, isolation, depression, getting out of the house less often. And, you know, all of these things from COVID and the pandemic alone are factors for all of us for social engagement. But when we're thinking about Parkinson's disease and some of the characteristics of that, the risk is even higher. So we really want to just be aware of that. Knowledge is power. So if you're aware of these things, that might help going forward to say, you know what, this is something I want to maintain and keep. I want to stay connected socially, stay engaged with other people so that I don't have these things as a challenge. Why is it important to seek help? 89% of patients with Parkinson's disease have speech, voice, and swallow characteristics, yet only 4% are receiving treatment. There's documented success of intensive voice treatment. And like you said in the polls, overwhelmingly, most people that have received therapy have found it to be helpful. 90% of patients in efficacy research study show improvements from pre to post treatment. And many of those, 80%, can maintain those improvements for 12 to 24 months. So there's research behind all the things that I'm about to share with you. So these are things that are backed, and I'll keep that as a reference for you. Our goals. We want to make sure that speech pathology is a part of the team when managing Parkinson's disease. We want to keep communication going. We want to maintain social engagement. We want to prevent social isolation and related depression, and we want to stay healthy with a strong voice and safe swallow. When should I see a speech language pathologist? If you or your partner notice changes in speech, swallowing, memory, cognition, the earlier the better. So I think we have a slide for that, Danielle. Okay, that's good. That's interesting. So over half of you are noticing changes in speech and voice, and almost half memory cognition, and about a third in swallow, and a fifth of you, all of the above. So that's really, that's interesting information. So hopefully the information shared today will be helpful for you. This is some information that I'm taking from the awesome resource the Parkinson Foundation has provided for you on the booklet called Speech and Swallowing, A Body Guide to Parkinson's Disease. I'm referencing it here, but I do believe you're going to be getting a copy of it as well. But this is an easy checklist where you maybe can use for bringing to your provider for that initial discussion. But it can also be used as a nice tracker to say, okay, the last time I did this checklist, I only checked 3 and now I've checked 5. So it's just a way to track how things are going, because with Parkinson's disease, that self-perception sometimes isn't totally on. So these checklists can be great tools. So just briefly, I'm often asked to repeat a statement. People look confused when they're trying hard to listen when I speak. I'm hearing that I'm slurring or mumbling, or I'm getting requests to speak up. I might be getting ignored. I'm not attending social gatherings. I avoid the telephone. I clear my throat a lot, and so on. So those can be very good thoughts to just keep on the radar and also to use and track along. There's also a nice checklist for the care partner. So the same thing, this is coming from the same resource that I put up above, but I have difficulty hearing when my partner is speaking. I have difficulty understanding the speech. I find that my care partner, my loved one, is running out of breath when speaking. I'm getting accused of being ignoring. So just things like that for the care partner also to have as a sort of a basis, but then also something to track can be good information. So what help is available? I'm going to be talking about treatment for speech first, but I also am going to talk about swallowing later on. I'm trying to make sure I'm watching the time here. Speech therapists love to talk, so I'm at risk for talking too much. What help is available? It's important when you're working with to add a speech pathologist onto your team that you find one that's certified in Parkinson specific treatments. I would say the two most prevalent treatments would be the Lee Silverman voice treatment, or is often called the LOUD program, or the Parkinson Voice Project, or the Speak Out program. So I think I have a poll for these, Danielle. Okay, that's good to know. So 82% of you have tried the LOUD program, and 11 have tried Speak Out, and then traditional is 21. Okay, so the Lee Silverman, or the LOUD program, is a research-based program. It's typically 16 sessions plus an evaluation, and the focus is solely on being loud. There's a treatment program to work through. It benefits the person in the ability to have better perception of loudness, but it also shows improvements in facial expression, pitch, rate, swallow. So those things, it trickles, all of those things can be helped just from the focus on being loud. And the other trickle down would be just the benefits of social engagement, being understood, and being included. There's a transition to a home program when this treatment is completed. And also many communities have a loud crowd or a loud group that is something to attend to go through the exercises with other people that have completed the program. I've heard that they're starting to do some of these groups online, which can be helpful as well with everything going on with COVID. The Parkinson Voice Project, or Speak Out program, I included the links for both of these on here, is similar, but it's also research-based. It's typically 12 sessions plus an evaluation. You are provided with a specialized workbook. The difference with this one is that there's a little bit more flexibility as far as the frequency. It doesn't have to be 4 days a week for 4 weeks. It can be 3 days a week. There's just a little more flexibility, which works better for some people. And it also includes some emphasis on cognitive exercises. So it pulls some of that cognitive information in with the voice and the loudness exercises. And many people find that to be helpful. There's also a transition upon completion to a loud crowd. And these are also things that are being transitioned to online. Our therapists here are certified in both of these programs. I know Speak Out especially is working on providing this whole program via telehealth. I believe the LOUD program is also, but we're finding ways to make sure that the treatment can be effective even with telehealth. And I should mention that just because of COVID, we're providing a lot of our therapy via telehealth here. And it can be done in person too. I think things will change once our restrictions are lifted, but it's nice to know that it's an option and that people can continue to get the care they need even when they're asked to be at home for a while. I know some of the providers seem to prefer Speak Out because another difference between the two, the LOUD program requires an assessment by an ear, nose, and throat specialist prior to starting. So an ENT eval is required to assess the health of the vocal cords because we work so much on loudness that if there's any irritation or inflammation on the vocal cords, this therapy could aggravate that. The Speak Out program does not require that. And depending on how easy it is to get to and from the doctor and what your specialist or neurologist might think, the Speak Out program can be a nice fit for that in those instances. They're both fantastic. They're both really fun to do. We see amazing results with both of them. So it's just good to know about that those are options for direct treatment for communication, but they both show improvements in other areas too, including swallow. Why does the treatment work? I always like to know the why. Like, okay, you're telling me to be loud all the time. Why is that helping me? But to understand the focus on being loud, it bombards the central nervous system. So it involves like the motor learning or the rescaling and the sensory perception of really what loud is. It's that internal cue of, am I being loud or not? That's one thing that fades and changes with Parkinson's consistently. So this therapy bombards the nervous system to help that. It also bombards the emotional system just by being loud. It can enhance motivation, it can enhance confidence, but the effort that it takes to be loud can improve on all of those things. And the peripheral motor system, the physical exercise and the training that it requires just to participate. So increased effort equals increased loudness equals increased speech production. Overall, what we're going for is increased vocal cord adduction. We want the vocal cords to come together strongly, and we want to have better respiratory support behind that so that we have better, stronger voicing. So I'll talk later, but the vocal cords are kind of the gateway to your lungs, and it's very helpful for swallow when your vocal cords are closed tightly too, just to keep your lungs healthy if there is any trouble swallowing. See a speech language pathologist and other strategies. So again, on this research, I won't go through it in detail. Using good vocal hygiene. Some people laugh at that term, but we talk a lot about vocal hygiene around here, making sure that you're drinking plenty of fluids to stay hydrated, because if you're dehydrated, your vocal cords are dehydrated, and that can change voicing. Making sure you're not overdoing it or straining, being careful with how much throat clearing, and treating any heartburn or reflux that might be a part of it, because those things sometimes counteract. Other strategies continued again from the Body Guide Speech and Swallowing from the Parkinson Foundation is just posture and breathing exercises, being able to sit up straight and take a deep breath. There's some really good resources in there, again, because respiratory and support is so important. Okay, so that's a brief overview of the speech and communication and voice treatment. I'll just talk again briefly about swallowing problems. The Parkinson Foundation has speech and swallowing resource in that, the swallowing information in that same resource. So people with PD may notice changes or difficulty with chewing, eating, or swallowing. Those show up as either slowness, sometimes a feeling of food being caught in your throat, coughing and throat clearing, which is one of the bigger red flags, difficulty with swallowing pills or drooling, and a sensation that swallowing just takes more effort, a feeling of fatigue when eating. There's assessment that takes a really close look at that. It's a moving x-ray called a video fluoroscopy. And some facilities are trained in FEES, which is a scope that's inserted through the nose to watch, to get a better view of the swallow function. So swallow treatment, it's best developed with your whole team, which includes your doctor. Speech pathologists are typically the discipline or the specialists that do treat swallowing difficulties. Dietitians can be helpful if there's any changes required. It can include direct treatment or exercises for muscles of the tongue, the lips, things like that to help improve swallow, but it can also include some compensatory things which might involve changing the texture or thickness of food and liquids. Therapy can also focus on strategies. So there's different tricks or ways of swallowing that can help compensate for difficulties and make swallowing safer. Ultimately, we want to avoid aspiration. And what that is just any foreign food or liquid getting into your lungs to start respiratory illness. Especially right now in our current climate with COVID, we really want to maintain respiratory health as much as possible. So being diligent about safe swallowing is super important. I won't go through these in detail. They are in that body guide speech and swallowing book. Just some general tips for safe swallow. These are good for most people, but if you're wanting to have individualized specific strategies, that would require direct treatment from a speech pathologist. We get a lot of questions about drooling. So many people say I'm producing so much extra saliva that I'm drooling all the time. And I would say it's usually not more saliva. It's just that a person doesn't swallow or manage that saliva as frequently or as automatically. So, you know, we swallow X amount of times in an hour. If we cut that down, then that saliva that continues to produce might fall forward. So there are treatment approaches for that to help trigger that swallow. Some of those are included here. As far as just, these are some tricks, really hot, really cold liquids, sometimes carbonated liquids can help with that. And just ways to manage the drooling itself. It's definitely something to talk with your doctor about. There's some PD medications that can be used to make it easier to swallow. There's anticholinergic medications that decrease the production of saliva. That's not always a good fit, but it's definitely worth a discussion with your doctor about that. There's that same medicine in a transdermal patch that is absorbed into the bloodstream that also has similar side effects of decreasing the production of saliva. Sometimes eye drops of atropine can be used, which they're given under the tongue and they're meant to dry the mouth. So those are all things, they all have side effects. They're definitely things to discuss with your physician if drooling is an ongoing issue. Botox injection is another one. That's typically something that needs to be repeated every 3 to 4 months. The speech vive is another compensatory tool. Again, I'm going to make the pitch that almost always it's worth a trial of treatment to improve function and maintain strength and function as much as possible. If those things are just typically we're hitting a wall with and we're not able to improve or maintain the function, then tools like the speech vive can be helpful because it forces a person to try to talk a little louder by providing some background noise in the ear. So I won't go into that in detail either because that's also in that same resource. Fantastic resource. There's so much good information in there. Along the same line is assistive communication. So that can be used, you know, a personal amplification like a tiny microphone that might be held so when you're talking, your voice is amplified. That's sometimes helpful. Usually when a person is quiet enough to need an amplification system, there's also imprecise articulation. So it sometimes serves to just amplify speech that's hard to understand anyway. And volume is really the answer to try to push past both of those things. Communication boards, communication systems, all of those things can be helpful to compensate if communication function is at a standstill or changing. We typically treat first and compensate as needed. So if you're feeling like speech pathology is something that you'd want to include in your care plan, the first thing you need to do is just speak with your neurologist or your primary care physician. The second thing, and it's important to find a certified speech language pathologist Traditional therapy is not the same. I know I saw some of you at 30% or so, I can't remember now, had tried traditional speech therapy without some of these specialized programs. And I'm old enough to have provided that type of therapy before I became certified in these approaches that are specifically designed for Parkinson's. And it's really night and day as far as the benefit. So much that it's the gold standard to go towards the specialized approaches versus traditional. Some providers will go so far as to say traditional therapy isn't super helpful. So you want to find a certified speech pathologist. When I say that, I'm talking about speech and language specifically. For swallowing, traditional therapy can be helpful. But if you're talking about the voice, speech, communication, those kinds of things, the certified speech pathologist in any of those programs I talked about, the loud or speak out, can be very helpful. Here are some things we hear all the time around here. My kids can hear me on the phone again. I smile more. I've started going to coffee again. My wife and I are playing cards again. I'm not afraid to crack a joke because people can hear me. My home exercises only take 10 minutes, and I can tell when I don't do them. I'm enjoying my food again. I'm not embarrassed about coughing. All these can be motivators to keep that home programming going. And the home programming is the key to maintaining the progress. Earlier, I said progress can be from 12 to 24 months held with the home programming. It's not uncommon for people after that period of time to come back for a refresher, but that progress is what we're wanting to hold. So home programming can be very important. We had a gal in here just last week who said, for the first time, I feel hope, because she wasn't able, swallowing was trouble, and also, you know, just communicating with family members was difficult. And there's been great benefit felt through these specific therapy approaches. So in summary, I don't know if I made it clear or not, but I believe communication is important. And there's definite health benefit to communication and social engagement. Communication abilities can be interrupted with Parkinson's disease. There are ways to maintain good communication through treatment, and a certified speech pathologist is an important part of your team. So that's all I have. I put my contact information here. I know I'll be available later on for questions with the panel, but I believe we'll go back to Erin, and she'll introduce your next awesome speaker, Teresa. You're lucky to get to hear from her today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nan. And like she said, you will join us later in the program for questions and answers. And now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Ms. Teresa Rene, an occupational therapist at Sanford Health. Thank you so much for joining us today, Teresa, and taking time, both of you actually, out of your clinic and seeing patients. So Teresa, I'll let you have the spotlight, and you can go ahead and start your presentation by sharing your slides. All right, looks like Teresa might be having a moment here to connect. There we go.
Had a little trouble with my mouse today.
That's all right. Thank you for joining us. Now we just need to see your beautiful face. There she is. All right. The floor is yours, Teresa.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here with all of you. My name is Teresa Rene. I'm an occupational therapist at Sanford Hospital in Fargo, North Dakota. I have an undergraduate from the College of St. Benedict in Liberal Studies, and I went on for my OT at the College of St. Catherine's. I have 32 years of experience with working with the neurological population, 15 years at Fairview and the University of Minnesota for you Minnesotans. And I have 17 years at Sanford. With the last 5 years, my emphasis has been a lot in Parkinson's patients. I am LSVT Big and Power certified, and I am very honored to be here to speak with you today. So we are going to today, I'm not going to spend a lot of time at the start today in talking about what OT and PT do. We'll touch base on that a little bit as we go or at the end, but we're going to talk mostly today on motor disabilities and a lot of just kind of common sense and some practical ideas for you guys today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is freezing. I had some contribution today by a physical therapist, Sasha Ham, who helped put the slides together on freezing of gait. And so we're going to first just talk about what freezing of gait is. It's also known as fog. It's a short-lasting inability to generate effective stepping. It's a sensation that your feet are glued to the floor or they're stuck. Freezing can happen in all different kinds of situations. It doesn't have to be just in walking, but that's one of the more common things. Sometimes it could be a really quick freeze where you almost don't know that you're freezing and you start to have a forward flex posture. And other times it's a real solid freeze where you're really stuck. Things that can cause freezing to occur: cluttered spaces, doorways, or any kinds of surface or threshold changes. Small spaces near the bed, closets, bathroom, laundry room, anywhere that's just a smaller space. So the house is certainly a factor in that. Freezing can occur with movements when you, especially turning. A lot of times, people with Parkinson's, one side is more affected than the other side. And so turning a certain direction can be quite challenging for them. And that can make the freezing more difficult. And then anytime you have to change directions, or you might be going down a hallway and have to make a turn, those can all bring on freezing. Activities such as initiating a task where you start to do something and that freezing will come on right at the start. Or multitasking when there's, oh, I've got a touchy mouse today, sorry. Whoop, hang on guys. Okay, there we go. So multitasking where you are trying to do more than one thing at the same time. Oh, here we go, huh? Okay, bear with me. Okay. And then getting up from chairs or getting up from the edge of a bed or any kind of surface where you are coming to stand can result in freezing episodes. What causes or what can bring on that freezing? Stress and anxiety is a big one for people. I see a lot of people that freeze when they're rushing or really in a hurry. I have one gentleman that I go to do a home visit, and he's either freezing or starting to freeze, and that posture comes forward with him. So things like getting to the doorbell, when family and friends come to visit, or just hanging out with people where there's more distraction. Like we talked about, any surface changes. So for instance, getting on and off an elevator, going through the bedroom door, going through the entrance to the house, all those things can cause freezing and can be increased stressors for you. Even when we talk about stress and anxiety and freezing, it can be a good stress. It doesn't always have to be a bad stress. If you're excited or anything that just gets you a little bit more worked up. A full bladder in the middle of the night can cause freezing. Crossing the street, anytime you're running late, anything where you're in a rush and a hurry. And then freezing can also occur when you're frustrated with your body or you're trying to fight your body a little bit. That will bring those episodes on more. So some things to know about freezing. Risk factors, early diagnosis before the age of 60, you may see freezing. People who have had freezing of gait for more than, or have been diagnosed with Parkinson's for more than 10 years, they will often have a higher incidence of freezing of gait. Approximately 40% of people will have that. And then as I talked about, stress and anxiety is a big contributor to freezing, and postural instability. So When I say postural instability, I'm referring to that decreased balance, that forward flex posture that often comes with Parkinson's. It can happen where it's like the head and the upper body lead and the feet stay back and the feet get stuck and it pitches you forward. So what's the big deal about freezing? Besides the fact that it's very frustrating when you're stuck and you can't move. The other problem is it results in a high risk of falls and can really impact your safety and ability to sedate in your homes. Causes a risk for injury, so you're at risk for fracturing something, having a head injury, multiple things. Your risk with falling, you have a higher mortality rate, and you are more apt to lose your independence and be at risk for not staying in your home. We also know that if you fall once, you are more likely to fall again, and it becomes this vicious cycle, especially when you think about if you know you fall and then you have that stress and anxiety about the fact you're going to fall again, that stress and anxiety adds to that freezing, and it becomes that vicious circle that goes on and doesn't stop. Sometimes caregivers can help, and sometimes caregivers can make it worse. We'll talk just briefly about a few things caregivers can do to help versus make it worse. So some just basic tips to reduce freezing. What you'll find is that not every tip works for every individual, and that's where therapy comes in to help you figure out what your triggers are and help you figure out strategies that work for you. So one thing you can do is try another movement. So that might be raising your arm, tipping your head, lifting a hand up, any kind of just change in movement, trying something different can help. Changing directions. So if your mind is on going forward, you might try to go to the right or go to the left. A laser can be helpful. There's a picture of that on the slide. You can get like a little pen light. The U-step walker has a laser on it. Some of you may or may not be familiar with that, but it has a laser on it that will help you to trigger you to take that next step. The other thing that can be helpful is visualizing an object on the ground. So you think about stepping over it, and that will often activate that movement to get going again. Wearing a metronome, the beat of the metronome can sometimes get you moving, okay? There's a lot of free apps on phones for metronomes, and you could purchase a metronome as well. Sometimes you can try humming a song and restart with the beat of the music. If you can think of a song, that is. You might even have to have a specific song that you know you're going to use when you freeze, and it should be something that you know really well. Some people find counting 1, 2, 3, and then go can work for them. Doing a weight shift side to side, so you're just going to lean and shift your weight from one foot to another. One of the problems with freezing is the ability to take that big step. And in order to take that step, you have to shift your weight to make that big step forward. Marching in place a few times and then trying to step forward can be helpful. One of the biggest things to remember is don't fight the freeze. Don't force yourself, and just try to relax. Try to let your body just take it as it is. Sort of be mindful of accepting that freeze. We know that the more you try to fight the freeze, the worse that freeze is going to get, and the more likely you are to fall. Some other things you can do to help with reducing freezing: avoiding distractions. I tell people, if you're with someone and you're going to talk, just stop and talk and then go. And you can do that periodically rather than always having to talk and move at the same time. And this is an example where caregivers wait to talk to someone until they're done moving, rather than trying to hold a conversation in movement and in motion. An assistive device can be very helpful, particularly front-wheeled walkers, four-wheeled walkers that often have seats on them and brakes on them, and then the U-step walker, which is a heavier walker that has a laser beam on it, and it's geared very specifically to Parkinson's disease. Walking heel to toe, that helps to prevent that upper body leading, and so it helps prevent that fall if you're freezing, and it helps eliminate that freeze a little bit. Taping lines on the floor in problem areas. So let's say you struggle a lot getting up in the night. You might try taping lines on the floor to that bathroom, or if you're struggling with getting maybe to the bed, tape some lines to help you get yourself to the bed. And then you think about stepping over those lines, and they're that visual cue. Or some people will put a strip of tape in a doorway to help them clear that threshold. Another one I like to use a lot is telling people to look beyond their visual target. So when people start thinking too hard about where they're going, that can really lead to freezing and getting that body coming forward rather than the feet keeping up. So I tell them, find a visual target in the room that you're going to, look beyond your destination, and that can really help with freezing. Sometimes I'll tell people to post something, a picture or something real bright that will catch their eye that they always use to get their eyes on. We know that vision is a huge part of freezing as well as cognition. Or maybe put something up in the bathroom so that if when you get to the bathroom, you tend to be more freezing in the middle of the night, your eyes are on that, okay? And then I also like to use what are called the 4 S's. This isn't good just for freezing, but it's a good approach for just helping you in general with walking. If you start to feel like you're freezing, or you're starting to sort of have that shuffling gait, or kind of the feet get going too fast, stop what you're doing. Then the second S you're going to do is you're going to stand tall. So you're going to really work on that big posture. Then you're going to do that shifting weight. We talked about how shifting weight can help get you out of that freeze. And then taking that very big step. I will often tell people to post this on their walker, in the house, somewhere to help them remember. If you're finding you're having more cognitive troubles and that's too much to remember, sometimes even just the first one of stop, and then, or the 2 things of really halting and standing tall. Now, when you're in a freeze, you're already somewhat stopped, but sometimes the freeze is quick and then you start falling forward. So as soon as you feel that coming on, just stop. And so remembering just a couple concepts can be very helpful. In addition, take your medication on time. That's critical. Also, freezing of gait usually responds to, this is just a little tip, that it responds to levodopa early in the disease. And some people get help from deep brain stimulation. Others do not with their freezing. One of my favorites is trying visual imagery. I think of someone I knew with Parkinson's who, when she was in a wedding of her granddaughter, she never walked better because she visualized she was royalty walking down that aisle with great big posture and great big steps. And so I tell people use, whoops, here I am again. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. So think about being royalty or in a marching band where you're taking those big steps, or you'd be the bride or groom or in your family member's wedding walking down the aisle. I also tell people think about that big John Wayne stance versus that little Pee Wee Herman stance. I think it's important to try to have fun and visualize what you need to do. Tips for caregivers, just a real basic one is you can provide a cue, but keep it very, very simple. The more demands that someone has while they're trying to walk or while they're freezing, the harder it is. So just say big step or shift weight. Keep it very, very simple. There's some things on research. They talk about electrical stimulation to the foot, where they did sort of a vibration on the foot, and it showed that there was decreased episodes of freezing with that, and people were able to walk it and complete their tasks more quickly. There's sort of a questionability of how that might be used at home. I don't think that's been figured out yet. That's not an area I know a lot about. We do a lot of cognitive and visual training in our therapy sessions to work on attention, your memory, your ability to process information. We know that both cognition and vision can be hugely affected with Parkinson's. And so we work on that as well, because when you start to have to do two things, cognitive and motor, or visual and motor, it becomes harder for you, and then that increases your freezing. Okay, so I'm going to just run through a few practical tips to avoid falls related to freezing and just in general for home. This is kind of a caretakers can help in this area. Remove all scatter rugs, throw rugs, common sense, but you want to remove anything on the floor that does not need to be there. Visual items are distractors and they add to freezing, increase your risk of falling. We also know that with Parkinson's, your contrast sensitivity in your eyes, you cannot see that contrast as well. So any additional distractions are going to be harder, and you want to really light things up when you are trying to prevent freezing and just trying to prevent falls in general. Simplify things too. Excess clutter in any rooms will increase falling, and it will increase your cognitive and visual demands, which takes away from your focus on motor movement. And then keep things that you use all the time at a good height. So they're sort of neck to waist height, they're a little bit lower. So you're not trying to reach high and reach low. And then light it up. Do not ever, ever get up in the dark. Okay. That means bedroom, bathroom, hallways, overlight it up in the night. Some people can't sleep with the lights on, but if you can, use some extra night lights. If you know how to use your phone and set the flashlight, use a flashlight on your phone. Some people put rope lights under the bed. There's remote controls, like on your Christmas tree. When you have a remote control to light up the Christmas tree, you can do those kinds of things with a lamp and a remote control and have that by the bed. There's different options, but those are a few. And then of course, make sure you're wearing supportive non-slip footwear. I've seen many, many falls from that. Okay, we're gonna switch gears here, and we gotta move kind of quick. We're gonna talk about upper body movement in Parkinson's. So with upper body movement, this is a little more my specialty. We see slow, small movements of the arms and hands, just like the rest of the body. We know that Parkinson's is a whole body disease, but it affects the hands and arms just like it affects the legs and the rest of the body. You have difficulty with extending the hands and arms. They tend to go into more of a flex position, become more rigid and stiff. The whole body and the hands have more difficulty planning out motor movements. You may see tremors, and we know that people with Parkinson's have micrographia with writing. So managing those fine motor deficits, you can do amplitude-based exercises and finger flicks. You do tight fist and flick. There's all kinds of different things that you can do with that. You want to use more effort, more pressure when you're using your hands. You're going to work your hands harder, okay? You're almost going to visualize that you're mad when you're trying to do a fine motor task like buttons or zipping, and you're going to really exaggerate your hand movements as well. But with fine motor movements, it's a little harder to exaggerate the movement. So I say think about pressing harder, working harder, putting a lot more energy into it. Okay, and then see an OT that specializes in that area to help you. So now I want to talk a little bit about writing. We know that there's a lot of difficulty with writing. It's a very common symptom of Parkinson's and often shows up fairly early. So you'll often notice that there's changes in the writing. It becomes small and cramped, and that small cramped writing is called micrographia. You'll often lose the automatic motion and makes it difficult to smoothly flow with your handwriting. And it'll cause more cramping and more difficulty forming the letters, and causes tightness in the hands. And also we know that tremors in writing can make, the tremors that some people experience can make writing very difficult. So we're going to talk just quickly about some tips for writing. I'm going to give you 3 slides on it. One is about preparing to write. You always want to, before you begin, get prepared. Lined paper, and get it for your sticky notes, anything in the house that you want to write. Lines will help you a lot. Okay, it will give you that visual cue. It'll help you know where to start, where to stop, how big to make. Stabilize your work. I have learned that people often do not engage their non-dominant writing hand, so the paper is moving around. It's really hard to write if you already have issues and then your paper is moving. So I say clipboard, shelf liner under the clipboard. Those are really great ways to stabilize your work. Now, when you're out in public, that's pretty hard to do, but when you're working on training yourself and trying to get your writing better, that's a great way to do it. A good task light behind you will help. You want to put that light behind you so you really get to see what you're doing visually. People make the mistake of trying to write with their bodies too far away from the table. The elbow to hand has to get up on that table, and you have to have your body very close to the table, especially when you have tremors. For anyone that writes, paper at about a 45-degree angle is quite helpful. And then doing some kind of hand exercises that give you that sensory input and really make your hands feel what they need to do, and give them the body input before you try to work. Okay. Then when you go to write, printing and block writing can be helpful. Oh, I missed one tip on the last slide, is using a pencil. A pencil can really help slow you down when you're trying to learn and practice. Okay. So use that initially. Now, not every strategy I tell you will work for every person, but these are kind of the ones that I find work the best in general for people. Printing and block lettering will slow you down and help you print a little bit easier. I've learned that people don't get their finger close enough to the writing utensil, often up too high, if you can see that. Get down as far as you can, okay? You're going to write as big as you can, even when you're in a small space, and think how to make those letters very deliberately. Most people go too fast, so you really got to slow down and think about what you're doing. And this I've really learned from watching people is there's not enough pressure. Not enough pressure on the pencil itself with the fingertips, and not enough pressure when you write. Just like your stepping and your moving is too small, the pressure and the effort that you put forth when you write and use your hands is too small. And the other thing is to practice daily. It's not going to happen automatically. You want to take frequent rest breaks when you find your writing is falling apart. You can stop and add more flicks. Limit distractions when you're working on writing, just like for freezing. You can practice tracing over written material. It helps get that movement flowing. Just like with freezing and walking, a metronome or slow, quiet music can be helpful. I haven't found that one to work as often, but occasionally it will. And then sometimes various adaptive equipment will help, although I haven't had as much success with this either. Sometimes a little bit of a built up to help position the fingers will work. Once in a while weight, but as a general rule, weight doesn't help with tremor as much as stability of the arm and using that pressure. Then we're going to just go through a few slides about just motor movement in general and the need to stay active. I think it's extremely hard with COVID, all the tension going on in the world. winter coming. So just a few brief thoughts that we're going to go through. And I gave you a slide. This is how I feel some days, the joy of exercise. We know that with Parkinson's, there's a lot of apathy that people can experience and a hard time kind of getting started and getting motivated. And this is how I feel in the morning usually. So I thought maybe it'd give you a little laugh. Just as far as things available in the community, you can read that through that slide. I'm not going to go through that. But with COVID, a lot of these options are now online. So even if you don't have access to it in your community, you may find that online. And then follow instructions by your therapist if you're seeing a therapist. There's a lot of great YouTube sites. I put together some things that I think are great YouTube sites. If you just have family members or yourself go in and look, that's a good place to go. But make sure you consult with your therapist first, because it's sometimes hard to know what's an appropriate site for you versus someone else. And I don't want you doing exercises that could cause you injury. Have a set time to exercise. Set an alarm on your phone to get you going. Ask your spouse or a friend or someone that you also know that has Parkinson's to help keep you motivated. Plan it out. And I also think you got to have a very set designated place to exercise. And some simple tips to stay active. These are not so much specific to a whole workout of exercise, but just some little tips you can do around the house throughout your day. If you're a TV watcher, pick an exercise or an activity to do on every commercial break. Walk down the hall, walk out to get the mail, do a hand exercise. You don't have to do everything all at once. Start simple and expand from there. Keep exercises, any handouts you have where you frequently sit. You know, on a commercial, do sit to stands. Work on doing those as big as you can and getting up and down. March in place and sitting, march in place and standing. Maybe do one exercise before you get dressed, and you do a hand exercise before you write, and before you make something in the kitchen, you do one of your exercises you were trained in, or you do one of your speech exercises. And after you get one thing in the oven, you do something else. So don't think it all has to be done at once, all at the same time. And if you didn't get it done, then you've blown it for the day. And then try to keep, you know, picking a couple things in the day that you really love to do, and maybe incorporate that with some exercise where you interject that. All right. I am not going to go through in big detail what occupational therapy and physical therapy do. I am going to stress, though, as Nan did, that it's really, really important to find a therapist that's specifically trained in Parkinson's disease, whether they have specific Parkinson's training or they're LSVT big or power trained, because you are going to get much more out of what you need to learn and what your exercise programs and ways to help you if you do that. Both physical and therapy and occupational therapy can help you work on whole body movement. Okay. And we're going to end with a quote. I thought it was fitting. It's from Hubert H. Humphrey with This Political Time. Oh, my friend, it is not what they take away from you that counts. It's what you do with what you have left. And I would just say, don't forget that. There, you have so much potential and so much ability to keep life good and keep going. So let's do this. Let's keep active. Let's keep moving and try to keep positive, especially through this difficult time we're experiencing in 2020. Thank you again for letting me be a part of this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Teresa. That was fantastic. Now we have some time to bring Nan back and do some questions and answer. So we had some questions from registration and some attendees give us some questions. So I'll just let you know who gets who. All right, our first one is Nan. Hold on, I just scrolled it down. Okay, so you touched a little bit about the difference between speech therapy and big and loud. Can you just refresh us again if there's like two big pieces that you would say distinguish them?
Sure. Traditional speech therapy might work more on shaping speech, making speech more clear, working on the articulation piece of it, maybe some respiratory support. But I mean, and that's what we did when I started working. I've been doing this 26 some years, and you know, we didn't have these other programs at our disposal or availability, but some great people did an extensive amount of research and found that focusing on being loud helps the vocal cords. One of the other things is vocal cords tend to get bowed like this. You know, we want them flat. They can get bowed with Parkinson's. And so traditional therapy, if we were to work on a bowed vocal cord for another reason, we would be doing adduction exercises. And the research just shows that with Parkinson's, because there are such characteristic changes, that focusing on loud will help the vocal cord adduction. It helps the articulation. It helps respiratory support, all of those things at once at an intensive level. All of these programs recommend treatment to be 3 to 4 days a week for, 3 to 4 weeks. It's more intensive. And traditional therapy might be once a week, every other week, maybe twice a week. It's not as intensive, and in my experience, not as beneficial.
Okay, so
I'm talking specifically for Parkinson's. It can be helpful for other things, but for Parkinson's,
right.
These areas are different.
Right. And when do you see speech problems developing in Parkinson's? Would you say there's just unique to the person?
It varies. Sometimes it's one of the very first things that people notice, aside from some of the physical changes. But sometimes swallowing is the first thing people notice. Like, I'm having trouble with food feeling stuck in my throat. Sometimes it's tremor. So it really can be at any point. Some people make it through several years before there's any significant change with speech or voice or communication or swallow. So I don't think there's a solid answer on that. It's depending on the person.
Sure. Thank you. Teresa, do you have any suggestions for a good adaptive device for getting in and out of a car?
I'm not sure if I know the name of it, but some people use it's like you might know the name of it. Is it a car caddy or something? It's a grab bar kind of thing that you can hook onto the latch of your door. Depends. Do you have cloth or leather seats? If you have leather seats, you're going to slide a little bit easier. A garbage bag on the seat will help you slide a little bit. But it's a lot more about learning how to step big and use big amplitude with your movements, because a lot of times even the adaptive equipment piece is going to slow you down. So we don't find always that the adaptive aids help as much. Or if you are going to use that adaptive aid, you still have to put out that big effort and those big movements. And so sometimes we have to teach strategies even for not freezing as you step into that car. Sometimes I'll even put like a target on the floor of the inside of the vehicle. Then I'll tell someone to step big, or step that foot or stomp that foot right onto that target. Or sometimes if you're having trouble planning out that movement, just giving that visual target will be enough to help you get going there. Does that help at all?
Yes, I think I'll have to look up the name of that proper hook thing, because I know exactly. I can picture it in my head. I just don't know the name of it. So I will look that up. And
okay, that'd be great.
We'll be sending a thank you email with our slides in today's recording, and then any of these anecdotes of the questions that we need to answer.
And I can find that too and get that to you, Erin.
Great. Another question, Teresa. My handwriting has gotten bigger. Why?
Yeah, okay. So this is one that someone else might know a better answer to, and it has stumped me a little bit on a few people. But I'm not sure why, unless it may have something to do with your medications. That's what I kind of wonder. in some people. I think sometimes people are rushing too much. I have told people when their writing looks too big to use narrow line instead of like a college line, or, you know, don't go with too big of a line. That has helped a few people trying that block writing. But why I'm not 100% sure, I tend to see it more in people that have more festination and their feet are moving quicker as well. And they tend to rush a little bit more. So that those are some of the Parkinson's symptoms that that people that write too big may struggle with. I don't see it a lot, but I have seen it. So
Interesting.
those are my answers to that as best I can there.
Thank you. Nan, can stuttering be a first symptom of Parkinson's? It was this person's first symptom.
I guess I'd be curious if the disfluency was a new thing or something that was maybe a threshold from younger years. I would say typically it's not a sign. That's not to say it couldn't be. We often see disfluencies or stuttering with people who might have had a brain injury or a tumor or some strokes or seizure activity. So there's definitely a neurological component for stuttering or disfluency. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility. That treatment would be totally different than the things I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think that would be unusual. I'm not going to say it's not possible.
Okay, thanks. All right, Teresa, suggestions for posture. Having slouching with pain, do braces or postural correctors work?
All you have to do is say posture. It makes me want to sit up better.
Out
I know.
that. I got something about
looking for suggestions. Looking for suggestions to improve posture. Do you have any suggestions on braces or correctors that would work? I know I've seen a lot of new apps or different things you can wear to help correct your posture.
Sure. I'm not as big a proponent of adaptive posture aids. We know that posture is a big problem with Parkinson's. I'm much more about seeing therapy to address those postural issues, to work on specific exercises to address that. And so some of the power training is really good for the posture. A lot of, I like to have people do a lot of extension exercises to work on posture. I would be very against getting anything for posture without seeing a specialist, both a physician and your therapist, probably both PT and OT, and have it be someone who's specialized in Parkinson's disease. You know, that's stand tall kind of a concept, the John Wayne, some of those visual imagery things will also help you. But I also find that people who have had back surgery sometimes struggle even more so with their posture than others. That's sometimes where an assistive device can be very helpful to get that upright posture. Vision can also play a factor in that. Some of the ocular motility motions of the eyes can play a factor in that posture. So there's just so much that goes into posture that I think you're going to do yourself harm to use just something to fix your posture and hold you there, because the posture happens when you're moving, when you're lying down, when you're sitting up. It's everywhere all day long.
So really seeking out that
therapy with Parkinson's specific training.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you, Teresa. This is from a registration question. My mom is in stage 3 of Parkinson's and using a walker most of the time. What new movement therapies might be helpful in slowing down the further progression of using her walker to, a wheelchair?
Sure. Well, it kind of goes back to seeing physical therapy and occupational therapy. with someone trained in movement disorders, both like the LSVT Big and the Power program can do a lot of things in all different positions to help with that. I would also even just use some of those really basic tips to keep her moving. If people sit and people don't move, they're going to have a really hard time maintaining that ability to walk. Okay. And there's a lot of different strategies. You know, the physical therapist is going to be the one who's much more trained in assistive devices and determining the appropriate assistive device and focusing on mobility. But at least in our facility, we really split all of it because it is such a whole body movement disorder. And I think it's important to see both of us because one will work on more the basics of the mobility and one will incorporate into that day-to-day surroundings. But that's the key, is keeping moving and seeing therapists. And people are, at least up in this area, we're doing some maintenance programs, at least in some facilities, so that we're always a little bit in touch with people. And then those community activities are also really important.
Okay, thanks. Nan, you had touched on a little bit about Botox can help treat with drooling. And we had a question come in that, how does Botox treat dystonia? Is that in your wheelhouse to talk about that?
There is a Botox treatment used typically for dystonia that some physicians use for dysphonia. So one of them is for movement. It's not FDA approved, but some physicians are finding it helpful in treating dysphonia. So dysphonia is like disruption in voicing. Dystonia is like disruption in muscle tone. So it's used for that. That wouldn't be the purpose of the use from our perspective, but it is used in that realm, sort of off market. Lots of medications are used for other reasons than what they were designed for, and that would be an example of that.
Okay. And Teresa, you had touched on writing, how your writing may become small and difficult to perform due to Parkinson's. What happens if you have problems with spelling words? Is that your memory that's forgetting to spell? Is that affected by Parkinson's as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a variety of things, and Nan might be able to add to this as well, but I see it a lot. I think it's a cognitive component, somewhat of a visual processing component, and somewhat of a motor planning component possibly. But I don't have like hard facts about what it is that is always causing that. But it is interesting. I do find that even just practicing writing, people tend to do a little bit better even with that, with the spelling. But yes, I see that can be difficult, especially as your Parkinson's progresses. But I've also seen it fairly early for people. But yeah, I think it's a combination. Nan, do you have some input on that as well?
It cut out a little bit. Is the question that there's changes in spelling with writing, not with speaking though? Okay. You know, we see that in here in other areas. I don't know that I've seen that a lot related with Parkinson's. Sometimes people, it's, you know, can be an attention thing, you know, just as far as a focus while writing. And yeah, there's programs and exercises to raise awareness. Usually that's not a lost ability. It might just be that, you know, that pathway needs to be worked a little more exercise, like Teresa said, just practicing. That can just bring it back up to the surface where that it's more automatic, because the English language is by far the worst language as far as spelling and all these different rules here and there, where it's very easy to make a spelling error with any change in threshold for attention Or, you know, if your body and your brain is just pulled elsewhere with pain, attention, you know, mood, all of those, any cognitive changes, those things can just lower that threshold a little bit, and practicing can be helpful. So there's definitely exercises for that, and a lot of new apps coming out for that too.
I definitely think I tend to think there's a motor planning problem in that writing and spelling, but like I said, I don't have like hard fact on that. It's kind of just a gut from watching people. And I think maybe timing of meds, like sometimes it goes well and other times it doesn't go well. Fatigue can play a factor. And I think some people have quit writing. And so when you quit writing, your ability to spell is gonna go down. So you really got to practice that a lot to get that habit back and to get those skills.
That's very true.
Sometimes I will see perseveration, which sometimes looks and feels like a spelling issue, but it's really just an unintentional repetition of a letter. You might write the with TTHE or just an extra here and there, and that would be a slightly different approach. But I agree with Teresa, it's just something that needs to be, that road needs to be driven on for that to maintain.
I see a lot of issues with gross motor planning as well, and I just think it carries over into everything else.
Well, great. Well, thank you for your time. We did have an attendee write in that she looked up the device for the car, and it's called the auto assist handle.
Okay, I also think there's a couple other names.
Okay.
So if you don't, but if you probably Googled handle to help you get in your car, it'll show up.
It'll show up.
Great. Show up. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Nan and Teresa, so much for spending your afternoon with us and time for presentations and questions. So with that, yes, thank you.
Thanks.
So with that, I just have a few pieces to share. A big thank you to everyone from joining us today. As I was looking through, we had people from Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, Montreal. So it's great that you guys are able to connect and find support and resources for you. We greatly appreciate your feedback on today's program by completing a survey. This feedback helps provide us with the plans to help with future programming. So if the time of the day or the length of the program was off, please let us know. We will also email the link for that survey and the recordings and the slides when they are posted on our website and a few of the resources that we talked about today. Just want to plug again, we have weekly programs happening during this time of social distancing to help you stay healthy and safe at home. They are the PD Health at Home with Mindfulness Monday, Wellness Wednesdays, and Fitness Fridays. To learn more and to register, please visit parkinson.org/PD Health. And you can visit this page to see the previous programs all the way from April till now. And lastly, we are here for you. You are not alone during this. Check out our website for more information. Call our helpline where you'll talk to a real in-person Parkinson's specialist, and we're here for you. So until next time, stay well.